Right. Well, look, good morning, everyone. And this is a bit of a surprise, 6-month gap. And Claire and I decided after finding a gap in our busy schedules that we should really get together again to talk procurement and finance. So welcome back to the first episode in a long time of the Procurement and Finance Coffee Break. And I am particularly delighted to welcome our guest today, Ben Farrell, an ex-colleague of mine, more on that later. But Ben, welcome. Perhaps you'd like to introduce yourself.
Thank you both very much for inviting me. A bit of a surprise generally, isn't it, to be here? But I really appreciate the opportunities. For those who haven't met, I'm Ben Farrell. I'm the CEO of CIPS, Chartered Institute of Procurement and Supply, which I've been doing for about 18 months now, which I'm loving and we'll have a chance to talk about. For a long time, I was a soldier with Richard for 20 plus years, left the army in 2011 and went into retail in John Lewis and Waitrose, actually, and then spent more than a decade navigating through retail. And that was all fantastically interesting, actually, and gave me a great perspective. I had responsibility for procurement, supply chain aspects and retail. So got a good perspective, I think, from both the army and business on where we are. Yeah, it'd be good to chat anyway. And generally,
really excited to have you, Ben. So maybe I'll kick off with my first question. So with the conflict in the Middle East and also with tariffs and trade barriers back firmly on the agenda, how do you see, from your perspective, procurement leaders balancing cost optimization, ESG and net zero commitments, but also with the changes in tariffs and potentially rerouting as well?
And the important thing is, Ben, just remember, we like to start light and then make the coffins heavier as we go.
Yes. Okay? Let's go with the heavyweight.
Hang in there.
I was moving my Rubik's Cube as you were saying that. You know what? I'd like to start with this. I enjoyed someone saying this morning, I love this geostrategic analysis. It was like saying, what's China up to? They're just watching. And it was that great Napoleonic thing of saying, never interrupt your enemies when they're making a terrible mistake. I think, that's what's going on. So, this last 18 months, I suppose, essentially since Trump's election in the US has seen pretty seismic changes, isn't it, across the globe in trading patterns. And I've begun to start thinking more about how interconnected the world is. There's a great book by Ed Conway, the Sky News economics and data presenter, super book on called Material World. And it sort of shines a light into global supply. He uses some good examples that everyone can relate to, like the iPhone, of all the parts from so many different nations coming together to charge the economies of the world that we operate in today in a way that people, I don't think, fully understand. So the implications of trade changes like the tariffs and people adjusting their supply chain are just massive. And so through the last year, procurement supply chain people have been changing the nature of how they're doing and managing this sort of in-flight change constantly. And so, this has just been another compound effect on top of that. And we've got a brilliant WhatsApp community in the Middle East, particularly active. And it turned from, this is what we're doing in our day job type things. Do you want to do some more train, get together for a conference, into a live replanning operation saying, is the port open in Salalah? What are you doing? What's the shipping prices? Literally managing in flight. And all those things that, you pointed at, the cost complexity, where people suddenly added another $20 on the cost of a 30-foot container. That was all happening live, and people were adjusting and saying, we're not going to do that, we're going to do this. And then what are you about your sustainability? And everyone said, well, actually, this is back in the queue right now. We're trying to do all this stuff. So do you know what? It's completely dynamic. And what I always, keep saying to everybody is, and I'll be quiet in a second because now you've unleashed me on this, is I think there's quite a lot, apart from how unrecognized global supply is and the nature of it these days. Also, the contribution to the success of organizations, governments, prosperities of nations, and organizations that these professionals, of procurement supply professionals, are making. And so I think our big job is to raise that up, to recognize both those things, the nature of trade and the contribution this profession is making. That's why I keep talking about the evolution. So I've been looking at the history of professions development. And I keep saying this is a natural moment of evolution for all the things you're describing, and also tech changes, the nature of business change. There's lots of different things that are coming together to stimulate an evolution to recognize the future. So but a lot in that.
Do you know what I love that thought, and I think that we all know change happens when there's some kind of discontinuity or shock, and this is definitely a discontinuity or shock. I mean, about 5 weeks ago, whichever was the weekend before the conflict started in Iran, I was doing a 4-hour afternoon training session for kind of middle seniority procurement managers all around the world, and a lot of them were US based. If you remember, it was I think on the Thursday the court had struck down the tariffs, and then on the Friday Trump had put in a new set of 10% tariffs, and we started the training session at, I think it was 1:00 in the afternoon. And during the training session, they changed again. If you remember, he increased them, I think, to 15 or 20. And, I think, you've been doing this since 2011. I've been doing it a little, slightly longer. I don't think there's ever been a time, even during the pandemic, where there has been not volatility, but just complete uncertainty about what's happening. I mean, in the pandemic, everyone kind of understood everyone's ill, they can't get to work, we can't ship stuff, we'll solve the problem. Now it's completely different. You wake up on a Monday morning and you simply don't know what's changed. And therefore, and this is, I'd love to get your perspective, given that, the view you have globally of procurement professionals. It strikes me that the reason that there is this big push for evolution, or this big requirement for evolution, is how on earth are procurement professionals managing to cope with all of those different input signals in order to make sensible recommendations to their stakeholders? I mean, what are you observing in how people are reacting?
I think they've done a brilliant job in reacting, and in a perpetual state of two things: crisis management. So we do a quarterly pulse survey across the world, and it's very well engaged with, and we have an index, a sort of escalator of one of the measures of anxiety, actually.
Right.
And I was surprised. So out of 7, the top score can be 7. And I think it was the spring of last year, it was 4.5, and it nudged to 5 through the summer. And we've just got one out at the moment. That's obviously going to be probably further up the scale as well. So they are managing in a very pressured sense, and making a great contribution, I think, to business success and national success and national resilience in all sorts of different ways, but not easily, actually. And I'm not, I'm always impressed by how quickly people get on with things and really respond fantastically. It's a bit like you were saying, Rich, in the pandemic, people sort of knew what they're doing, but in a way, people really stepped up, didn't they, at that stage? And so what you can see is the profession. I'm really chuffed. We're about to announce that we've got a partnership with the DRI, the Disaster Recovery Institute, to combine all the procurement skills with the disaster, because it seems to me that there's no case that any of this is going away. As you say, next Monday morning, it's Cuba. Next, there's a new set of tariffs. We go back to Greenland. All the possibilities that we never dream up can play out. So,
what does that mean, though, for procurement operating models? Because, for example, I'm just working with a listed business, and one of the things that I've noticed there is they've been through a series of kind of boom and bust cycles where their operating model has had to be very reactionary to sort of significant events where they've just had to sort of chop people back to the minimum, and as a result of that, they kind of like just coming out of the light and realizing their operating model is not ideal anymore. But then if you think about what you're describing for procurement professionals and how they design their operating model, right, what you're describing is a constant state of reaction, needing to be in sort of constant crisis management mode.
Mm.
Does that mean procurement professionals have to redesign their operating models to be able to have that capacity for that? And what does it mean for best practice procurement operating models if you've got that going on? Because the outcome is either actually you don't have capacity to think strategically about your operating model and you're just reacting, or the other is you accept that you need a crisis mode element to your operating model and you redesign accordingly.
I think, yeah. I think to take the crisis bit in isolation would take you there, but I do think you would need to consider like how AI is playing into the operating model and thinking about all of this. So I think we're launching this thing. We've sort of launched it because of enthusiasm, called the Great Conversation, a global dialogue on the future of the profession of procurement supply. And in April, we're going to share this across the world. And I want as many people as possible to give us feedback, because we want to respond to all the dimensions that would get us to an operating model as one of the outputs of it. New job descriptions, new operating models, all the things that play into this space. So I think, to answer your question super clearly, that the crisis response mechanism is part, I think, of a new operating model that is needed to play the role that procurement professionals are increasingly required to play, and that goes along with AI. I also think there are aspects of, when I go to organizations, when you see separate parts of the organization worrying about sustainability and environmental credentials, and you know what? That's got to be sitting around here, hasn't it? All in the same, cyber risk and security. Look what happened to JLR. There is a new world that we need to design for, I think, to bring it all into a coherent operating model that stacks up and makes sense, because we're moving beyond those disparate parts, I think. I'd also go back to saying that what I've encouraged people to see as increasingly like the supply web and not the supply chain, where there are branches and sequels of opportunities to think not in a linear sense, but I know almost like when I think, you asked me a question up, what about the price volatility, risk, sustainability, all those things, but you've got a web of choices, a bit like a Netflix set of choices that are served up to you. And that's what you need today. And tomorrow it might look a bit different, but the way we can serve up choices through AI, I think gives more and more options for contingency planning. So you can get ahead by thinking, I'm well planned, I've got choices, I've got levers I can pull in a crisis, but it's not necessarily responsive. It's actually preemptive work that I think will help people more and more. And if you can get those choices together, you say, do you know what? I understand that choice is going to risk pricing, but gets my sustainability where I need it once it needs to be. There's trade-offs and all those bits and pieces in there that we get through this, what I call this, badly, the supply web. But do you know what I mean? It's back to the nature of global trade and how interconnected it is.
I'm looking forward to seeing what the results are from the Great Conversation, and I've got a couple of questions.
We must get you involved, you guys. I mean, honestly. And the other thing, Richard, we need to take the conversation beyond the walls of our healthy echo chamber. Otherwise, we'll tell us it's so exciting, the future's amazing. But we need to get Claire and senior business people involved, and they need to understand why this is an important shift.
Claire's got nothing good to say about procurement. Don't talk to her about it.
Operating model and technology is more my sweet spot, Ben.
Well, we need, but when we talk about I'm saying to the CPOs, look, the important contribution is enterprise level decision making, and you're involved.
Absolutely right.
That is where we need to operate, and you can blend together all the dimensions of a good decision to help the business make those great decisions.
Right. Well, sorry, go on.
No, that needs to be recognised out with procurement and supply. So that the CEO's going, no, I need these people alongside me, because they get the multi-dimensional aspects of these decisions increasingly, and they can bring it all together. They've got a good view of the organizations that enable our success as well. They understand the contract obligations. So all of this coming together gets people to the profession at that level, and away from being the recipients of tasks to go and buy stuff from people. that's a horribly crude expression for it, but
Yeah.
where they're really driving the success of the organizations forward.
It definitely sounds like your organization. It sounds like, something where you had an outside in view of what a framework for a good operating model would look like might be useful from what you're saying, given that all these I guess competing factors at play at the moment.
Definitely. And one of the things I hope for the output of there's going to be a thing called the Great Conversation Live, which will be the output where in the autumn we share this refreshed view of the evolution, and that we can't not deal with the question of what does the operating model look like and the skill sets associated with that. All that sort of stuff's going to come together. So we've got a bit of work to do to help people bring that together.
I've got 2 questions, but I'm only going to ask them one at a time. I promise. And the first one, I want to take you back to the happy days of officer training, where, as you well know, it doesn't matter what your role is in the armed forces, you can learn it by running around with a log. Operate a tank, you run with a log. I learned to dive, run with a log. It's brilliant training. But actually, the thing that if anybody ever asked me, what is, what are the things that, that the army gave me that I think are still relevant now, I kind of say 2 things. The first is what you've just talked about, which is, the ability to consider the outcome that you or your business are trying to achieve, and therefore to think in a certain way about how you might go about delivering it. And that, that can be taught, but there's a second part, which I don't think we really realized was happening at the time, which was resilience. We, by being constantly messed around, show parades with kit going out the window, you just get settled in a harbour area and you had to move your vehicle. I mean, all of that, we had certain words for it at the time, but looking back, it has given us a tremendous sense of resilience. It takes a great deal to truly throw someone who's been through that. What in the Great Conversation? I mean, what are you seeing, or what are you hearing about how we build resilience in individuals, so that this geopolitical mess and this constant change and stress actually is something that people can cope with?
It's great. I'd like to have a nostalgic conversation with you about how much I enjoyed being messed around to build my resilience. And it was it's weird. My son, who's 20, is interested in joining the army. And people often say to me, what do you think about that? I said, to be honest, I'd do every day again. I really enjoyed it. It's a fabulous thing. But to answer your question, I one other thing, and the thing that strikes me, because I'm involved as in the Forces Employment Charity, seeking to find worthwhile, satisfactory employment for people leaving the armed forces. I often think about there's lots of hidden skills that people never really talk about as transferable. Resilience is definitely one of them. The other thing is, do you remember when we first started and we were often asked about end-to-end thinking about how you got a casualty from the point of wounding right the way back to a hospital? And I think that was really good for people's breadth of thought and consideration, because often I see very narrow perspectives about things. And I suppose, in a way, the good thing in procurement in an organization that interacts very broadly with internal groups of people, but externally as well, and so you get a really good breadth of that. So, but that's not instinctive in every organization. And I often see people who don't really understand what the business is actually trying to achieve, the recipients of tasks as well. So I think those are important things that we'll have to encourage out of the conversation as well.
It's hard to teach. So I can vouch for Richard's resilience. As I say, we've been friends since about 2015, and over that period of time, I've lost count on the number of times I've phoned him up because I'm going through a breakup of a relationship, or something mad is going on at work. Some partner or client is messing me about at work, and I'm venting down the phone at him. But how do you really...
Does he say, don't sweat the small stuff? And you think, this is massive. This is
But I feel like, as I've got older, resilience and perspective is it's a little bit something that comes with age, right? It's very hard for let's take if you're in your early 20s and you have a breakup relationship or you lose your job,
Mm-hmm.
that is the end of the world. But when you're older, you think, well, I'll find another job, and there's more than one fish in the sea. You learn that actually it's not, have that perspective, right? So how do you think you can, like, is that by having more mentors and mentorships in organizations in procurement? Because I do think perspective and resilience is not something that's easily to be trained on. It's more that a journey you have to go through in your life to gain it.
Yeah, I think this is I suppose you point out experience, and what Richard was describing, we had the experience of things that we didn't know were building resilience at the time.
Yeah.
They were testing our resilience, and people were seeing our response to that at the time. So that was built upon. Maybe some of we were there, we wanted to be part of something, and that was in a way an indication of our natural inclination to be able to withstand those sorts of environments, or a desire to be part of something. So that there is an instinctive bit of it, I think. But it does make me. It's a really good question, and whether I'm going to be able to answer it adequately. So the other side of the coin, you could reasonably say, what happens in the workplace today? Is it building resilience, or are we just fostering an environment where people don't have to manage things that are often things. So sometimes I worry about the mental health discussion taking us in a different direction than actually the requirements of the future to some extent. And I don't know that's totally fair. As long as that discussion is actually encouraging personal resilience, I think that can be really helpful, as opposed to creating an environment where people are less resilient. But I think that experience does it. And I think personal example as well. It goes, I really believe, our response to, what it's like in leadership, we set the tone. We set the tone, and our response to a situation will define people's response. They look at you and they learn from you. And I think that is the biggest gift we can actually give to people. And say, it was, when I was at John Lewis, Charlie Mayfield, weirdly enough, had been in the Scots Guards. When I was in the Irish Guards, he was the chairman, and he once said to me, and I've heard it before in a way, nothing is either as good or as bad as you imagine it. And he would always find a line through in a way. And I thought, well, that was really good and very considered. And so a lot of that is about how we would set the tone and not allow the people who think this is the end of the world to say, hang on a second, really isn't. So I think there is a coaching on an example part of that for sure.
If I'm conscious of time, and if I may just ask you, I guess, one final question, and it's, if you like, the second part, which is, okay, we've got resilience, as you say. I think that end-to-end thinking is important, and I address it in different language, but I still teach mission analysis to students. That thinking about what you're trying to do and what you've got and haven't got and what you're allowed and has it checked, all of that's good stuff. But the bit that I'm worried about is the reason that we as more senior officers were able to do what we did was because we had been officer cadets and we'd been platoon or troop commanders, and we'd got plenty of stuff wrong, and we'd learned and done that. And I think, I hope what comes out of the great conversation is what I call how are you going to create craftsmen when there are no apprentice jobs?
Yeah.
And to me, this is the biggest challenge with AI, that for the junior jobs in our profession, like any white collar profession, they are being replaced. But those are the jobs where you learn and you gain experience and you begin to build that resilience and understanding. And the reason that a senior procurement professional now can look at the output from some AI and say that's right or wrong is because they're a craftsman. They've been through that journey.
Yeah.
So how we are going to create future craftsmen, the new you, the new me, when there are none of the junior jobs, or very few of the junior jobs still truly available for people to cut their teeth, I think is one of the biggest challenges that not just procurement, every white collar profession is facing.
Yeah, completely. I was looking at graduate recruitment, and I felt it was so tough for the graduates and the drop in jobs in some professions. I don't know, Claire, where finance is getting to, but that sort of finance processing where you, as Rich described, you're cutting your teeth, that has the prospect of completely being overtaken by, AI for sure. But that made me think, and I'm not saying I necessarily got the answers. I was going back to the point about all the other component parts that play into procurement and bring it all together into a different job. And sometimes I start thinking about whether there's an evolution of the job to call it something else that brings together, the sustainability, which I think is a massive thing that we need to get really anxious about and worried. And I think, how many failed COPs, not to be horrible about it, but the reality is it's not had an impact on the global temperatures and the ambition there. So we need a new agenda around that. And clearly we're going to need to think about circularity. And so, we can talk about, also the many different dimensions of risk and resilience and managing that. And so there's a new job. And I think on top of those existing type of things, there's an evolution of the job that people will go to. And I think there'll always be elements of that you need to train in to start with, to create judgment. And so there is a different type of job in the future, but I do think there will be a requirement for people to think differently about what they're doing, because I keep describing it as being liberated. I think AI takes away some of the process and gives people purpose. What is the purpose of our organization? I love the idea of shifting from process to purpose and outcomes and giving people the opportunity to think, this is a better job. I have the opportunity to make a bigger contribution because I've been liberated from some of this. So I think there's some great opportunity in that. And I hope that the great conversation will be able to describe what would be an exciting and liberating opportunity for the profession to thrive in the future, and start upskilling people there. And I think, that's why I was much on my mind about what you're doing in the softer skills and the human dimension. And I loved what you were saying about the moral component. At the heart of businesses, there will be human beings, and we know it's going to be about what it feels like to work there. How do I interact with other people? That's not going away, is it? And that's where the most value is created. And you're always going to need judgment. And I don't know whether the future AI is a perfectly risk-free environment where there's no, hallucinations, there's no poor data. Increasingly, as the conversations become more sophisticated about AI, watched it very closely, obviously, in the last 18 months. And then gradually people are saying, well, we're not really good on data, so we can't really use it effectively. So I think it's a maturing conversation that actually in the end might say was a bit like when the laptops came in. We all got a laptop, but it's not really fundamentally dialed up the change to the extent of people who are describing it at a more extreme level. I don't think the adoption of AI across procurement has been as rapid and as profound yet than I suspect. I've seen some really good examples.
Like everywhere.
CRM was traditionally the CRM data process flows. You can put it coming too quickly.
I'm completely with it. Do you know, I saw something this year. Someone keeps relentlessly calling me. Saw something that's really cool. Defense procurement team, manufacturing, and we were talking about AI and what they were doing, and they were showing me that through the way they were using it, they were understanding their supply base, and they were beginning to understand where the component parts of their systems, defense systems, were coming from. And actually, going back to my supply web thinking, they think, hang on a second, we didn't know that our third, fourth, fifth order supply base was A, in that country, B, had that, therefore those risks associated. Right. So that then takes a different conversation. Do you know what I mean? It elevates people to have a better conversation about understanding what they're doing as an organization. And then you're into, what I was describing as enterprise level decision making. So I honestly think we have a chance to talk about the way it can liberate people to do better jobs rather than the anxiety around the loss of jobs. Clearly, it will change. I mean, in a very basic way. Do you remember the typing pool? And then we all got a laptop, and that's good, isn't it? That's moved better people into better jobs. So I'm positive about how we can describe the opportunity, and as long as everyone's like all these things, it's here. We can't resist it. But I do think there are some we need to do some work on it in CIPS as well. We're going to, I hope, create the hub, for want of a better expression, where everything you need to know about AI and procurement. I was thinking about some ideas we've got around with that. So people would say, I need your help to understand how I can use it and the implications, whether it's just the tool or the operating model implications, the stuff we were talking about earlier. Really, I think we can really help with that type of thing.
Ben, we could talk all day.
We could literally.
And someone's desperate to get hold of you, whoever it is. Probably a child having a crisis, like I can't get a taxi. Which is like,
do you know what it is? It's a guy who is convinced that AI stock trading is the way ahead, and they're trying to get me to invest in an AI model to trade shares on the stock market. And
I'm sure you've got your money ready to give him. Well, Ben, listen, it's been a pleasure. And listen, genuinely can't wait to see the result of the great conversation, coming soon.
Well, I'd like you to play a part in that. You've been involved for a long time and got some great wisdom on what we're all doing. You must come in, please, to see us. And we're going to orchestrate various events. We've got lots coming up, so it'd be great to have you involved.
And Claire, just to be clear, I did pay him to say I had great wisdom. Okay?
Yeah.
Well, look, Ben,
I'd forgotten. I'd forgotten about that project. Your project, that you did at when I saw that, I remembered.
Oh my goodness, the ethics of unmanned warfare. How about that? Yeah. Who'd have thought? 25 years ago, and here it is.
Yeah, it's amazing,
and it's affecting business now. Right.
Incredible.
Before we go down that rabbit hole, Ben, genuinely, thank you for joining us. Thank you for sharing your thoughts. And listen, well done on the great work you're doing at CIPS. I will get in touch and come and say hello.
Yeah, do please.
But thank you very much.
Great to see you both. Hopefully catch up with you soon. Thanks, Claire. Enjoy your holiday.
Thank you.
Yeah, perfect. All right. Well, listen, as ever, if you're interested in participating in the Procurement and Finance Coffee Break, get in touch. This will be up, and I'm sure we'll think of something else to talk about pretty soon. We won't be taking a long break. But for now, from all of us, thank you and goodbye.
Bye.